energy access practitioners, researchers, consultants, and policymakers. Welcome. This is a recorded short-form information session about the work done by the Renewable Energy for African Agriculture Project, or RE4AFAGRi for short. RE4AFAGRi is a project implemented by the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, the Polytechnic University of Turin, IIASA Consulting, the Universities of Zambia, Rwanda, and Cape Town, and TFE. The project is geared towards improving planning models for smallholder electrification in Africa. RE4AFAGRi forms part of LEAP-RE, which is the long-term research and innovation partnership on renewable energy between the European Union and the African Union. Funding has been provided by the EU's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. My name is Andre Troost, and I'm the consulting lead at TFE based in Cape Town, South Africa. TFE has been leading RE4AFAGRi's work on business models and techno-economics of the electrification of smallholder agriculture. What is all this work about? Well, it starts with the realization that smallholder farmers are the breadbasket of sub-Saharan Africa. They are responsible for 80% of the region's agricultural output. Yet, despite their critically important role, they are largely neglected, often living outside the reach of critical infrastructure. Electricity, which plays a vital role in agricultural productivity, remains especially elusive. 80% of the region's rural population are smallholder farmers, and only 29% of this population has access to electricity. Accelerating the pace of electrification would require a fundamental shift in how electrification interventions, especially those in rural areas, are designed and implemented. This work seeks to introduce this paradigm shift. We introduce the concept of user-led electrification interventions using renewable energy and offer approaches for how these can be designed and implemented in a context of the agri-energy nexus. What we mean by user-led is that pricing of products and business models used to sell those products are fundamentally based on the needs and ability to pay of smallholder farmers. Energy access business models are often designed with a wide variety of potential use cases in mind, or off-takers. There's nothing wrong with that. But given that such a large number of people living in unelectrified regions in sub-Saharan Africa are smallholder farmers, it makes sense to design energy access business models around agriculture. We also know that how important productive uses are for the economics of rural energy access interventions. 80% of revenue from mini-grids often comes from only 20% of the users, the productive users. So it's important to focus on these customers, and agriculture is a key productive use in rural areas. Finally, when we design business models around agricultural activities, and we also electrify those activities cost-effectively, then the success of rural energy access interventions could be increased. But the question remains, how do we identify financially viable electrification opportunities? That's where our techno-economic model comes in. The model we developed is designed to identify agricultural value chain activities that are financially viable for electrification from the perspective of the smallholder farmer. What makes this model different from other models? Well, we started from the premise that, as George Box famously said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So we developed a model that is not necessarily perfect, but is at least a bit more useful than most financial models that are used for identifying electrification opportunities. That increased utility comes from the inclusion of a much wider set of variables than what most models incorporate. For example, it is sensitive to the prices of different crops and incorporates different scenarios of seasonality and crop rotation, as well as usage of machinery per day and across seasons. The main value add is methodological. So it's a tool that you can use to calculate the financial viability of electrifying certain agro-processing and irrigation activities in your area. As a secondary value add, we pre-populated the model with indicative data to provide example insights on techno-economic viability of processing and irrigation activities across the key agri-value chains in Nigeria, Rwanda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. The model revolves around the central equation of marginal profit versus marginal expenditure. It then continues from the acknowledgement that marginal profit is marginal revenue minus marginal cost. How do we define these terms? Well, firstly, on marginal revenue, this is defined as the additional revenue enabled by the irrigation and processing activity. So the key here is like the revenue that is enabled by using the pump and machine, the revenue that otherwise would not have been generated by the farmer had it not been for the usage of that pump, that machine. How do we calculate this? For irrigation activities, we multiply the price margin, so the additional price per kilogram or the additional revenue per kilogram, multiplied by the number of kilograms, so the yield per hectare. In the case of agro-processing activities, we multiply the throughput per hour by the operating hours, so the number of hours that machine operates, and also, again, the price margin, because remember, both for agro-processing as well as for irrigation activities, there is a higher price the farmer can get. In the case of agro-processing, it is thanks to the higher quality because it's not processed. In the case of irrigation, it's a higher quality because the crop had access to water. How do we define marginal cost? These are the ongoing costs of performing the irrigation or processing activity. We consider costs such as the transportation of crops to the market, salaries for the operators of the pumps or the machines, maintenance, and electricity. In the case of standalone water pumps, for example, the solar panel is embedded into the product, so that's why there wouldn't be any ongoing costs. But in the case of a machine that's connected to the mini grid or the grid, that machine will consume electricity over time, which the farmer would need to pay for. So then the ongoing electricity cost can be variable. This is an example of what the model looks like in its Excel-based format. And remember, this is all downloadable from our website at RE4AFAGRi.Africa. And there's also a long form video where we have a tutorial explaining in depth, in real time, the functioning of the model in its Excel-based format. But in this view, you can see that it starts with the marginal revenue, so the revenue that the farmer makes by executing that activity, the marginal cost involved with operating the machine or the pump, the subtraction from the marginal revenue of the marginal cost, which gives us the marginal profit, and then the calculation of the payback period. So this is the number of months or years that it takes the farmer to make back the initial capital expenditure. And as you can see on the screen, the only activity that is unprofitable in this case in Zambia is cassava irrigation. This is our second output sheet or results sheet in the model, which is the calculation of the net present value and the internal rates of return. As we know, higher annual revenue leads to a higher internal rate of return, and annual loss leads to a loss-making investment. In this case, all activities are profitable except for maize milling in Zimbabwe. Once again, this is all explained in great depth in our long-form tutorial. So now that we have covered the question of how to identify financially viable electrification opportunities, we move on to the notion of designing business models that can lead to operational success. In our work, we have looked at 3 business models: pay-as-you-go, keymaker model, and community-centered business models. The pay-as-you-go model is just designed to enable the farmer to work around the initial capital expenditure and rather pay for the product in installments. The keymaker model is useful where the energy service company, the mini grid company perhaps, acts as an off-taker of the farmer's crops that's processed thanks to the process machine, and then essentially sells those products in the downstream market. Or the energy service company just serves as a link between the farmer and the downstream market. And this is all done just because smaller farmers are often very separated physically and in the form of networks from downstream urban markets. Finally, community-centered business models is really important because energy access interventions can benefit from a balance of responsibilities between the community and the private supplier of electricity. We also looked in this work at the macro environment in which all of these business models sit. So regulations is important, financing, and infrastructure. Regulations is especially important in the case of mini grids because these can often be affected by the main grid and other aspects, and there needs to be clarity around this. Financing is an important aspect because we hear time and time again of how companies in these markets struggle to access appropriate finance, and infrastructure, physical and digital infrastructure, which is needed for energy service companies like solar water pump suppliers or mini grid developers to deliver their services effectively. So for any other questions, contact me, contact our team, and we'll be very interested to share more information. Remember, you can download our report on business models. You can download the techno-economic model and also other knowledge products developed by our partners in this project from our project website at www.RE4AFAGRi.Africa.